Hello children. Once again today we have assembled here to do one of the most beautiful and finest poems in English literature, and that is A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever, written by John Keats. After reading the poem, you will like it very much. This poem can be understood from a very basic point of view as well as to an extremely philosophical point of view. Before we go into the text, let's know something about the poet as well as the poem. John Keats is one of the finest poets in English literature, and it is said that he followed the tradition of the Romantics of the 18th century. The Romantic poets of the 18th century were the poets who broke away from the traditions of the classical poets. They believed and defined poetry as spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. The title of the poem puts the entire philosophy of the 18th century Romanticism. In his poem Daffodils, William Wordsworth, who is also a Romantic poet, says that how once he glanced at a host of daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, and he sums up the poetry saying that I gazed and little thought what joy the sight had brought, for oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. These words talk about the philosophy of Romanticism, and Keats was one of the most loved poets of the Romantic period. The Romantic poets talked about poetry as emotions recapitulated in tranquility, and the beautiful things that we see in life will never fade away, but it will keep on coming to our heart and mind, becoming more and more beautiful every time they come on our heart and mind. When we are facing the dire times of our life, these things of beauty make our heart energized and make us feel that life is worth living. Before getting into the text, let's know some more things about John Keats and his poem, A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever. John Keats was a very highly ambitious poet, and through his writings, he wanted to create a little region in which lovers of poetry could wander. The contemporary critics of Keats say that if Keats had not died an early and untimely death, the crown of English literature would have rested on his head. He died at a tender age of only 26. His critics even say that when Keats wrote good, he was surely brilliant, as referring to his odes, and when he did not write well, he could be termed to be as quite pathetic. When we go through his life history and biography, we come to know that initially he had taken up the medical profession, but very soon he realized that there was a poet in him and it was more than any other profession to him. One of the landmarks of the British Romantic period, we find that Keats' odes are unsurpassable, and if death had not snatched him from life at a very tender age of 26, surely the crown of English literature would have been placed on his head. A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever is an excerpt from his longer poem named Endymion, which voices his eternal love for beauty. This poem, Endymion, comprises of about 4,000 lines and is based on myths. Some parts of this long poem displays Keats' poetic genius. In his poem, Ode to the Grecian Urn, Keats says that beauty is truth, truth beauty, that's all ye know on earth and that's all ye need to know. This long poem Endymion, written by Keats, which he called a great trial of invention. It received bitter attacks by the critics, and Keats was so badly and adversely affected by these criticisms that he developed a disease, TB, that is tuberculosis. He eventually moved to Rome during his last years of life and lived with Shelley, who was a close friend of his. Keats now lies peacefully in a beautiful graveyard in Rome. At the untimely death of Keats, Shelley wrote a very, very long elegy, an elegy of 55 stanzas, and this was one of the finest elegies of the English literature. And Shelley named the poem Adonis. It is a tribute to Keats by Shelley on his death. Keats shared his last days in a house close to the Spanish Stairs in Rome with Shelley. Talking about Endymion, let me tell you that Endymion was a very handsome shepherd. He lay among his sheep when Cynthia, the moon goddess, descended, and she was attracted to his beauty. Endymion, after having interaction with Cynthia, fell madly in love with her, and the shepherd pursues her. The love of Endymion reflects Keats' views that how man is in perennial search of eternal beauty to keep himself attached and trapped to this world wherein we live and which is not worth living, because all over we can find people being fraud and manipulative and calculative who are always ready to take out and take away something from us. People of this world have become utter selfish, self-centered, shrewd, and without love and affection for others. At such a situation, when we see a thing of beauty, we get energized, we get rejuvenated, we get blissful, and a hope to remain alive in this world sprouts in our heart. Otherwise, we can see acts of inhumanity, shrewdness, nastiness of people, people being fraud and manipulative, people being selfish, and these experiences distract our souls from this world, and we find it to be a very unattractive, gloomy place to live in. A thing of beauty can be anything. It's not only the beauty in nature, it can also be a sight of a mother caressing her child, friends sharing their emotions, the eloquent silence, the flowers blooming and dancing. It could also be a piece of art and architecture. It could also be a beautiful scene of a sunrise or sunset, or it can be the full moon shining brightly in the sky, or the million stars twinkling in the clear sky, or even host of birds flying into the sky chirping joyfully. It can be a beautiful book that we have read, or even a beautiful person we have interacted to, or a historical monument of love like the Taj Mahal, or a shower that falls to the earth after the scorching heat, and many more that appeals to our higher senses and remains latent in our heart forever. These moments of beauty, when we recapitulate or when we recollect and relive in times hard and intolerable, make us happy, gives us relief and rejoice us with a feeling of energy to think that love and beauty still exists in this world. A beautiful philosophical poetry by Keats, A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever, tells us that in fact, these things of beauty that we have experienced and lived in the past never cease, never dies, but its beauty increases each time when we recollect and relive them. The search of this perfection in beauty, which appeals to our higher senses, is the theme of this poem. Keats has beautifully said that these moments of beauties are like a barber that hold us on to live in this world of gloom and dearth. Let's come to the text now and understand it line by line, and let's also keep in mind that Keats was a great romantic poet and we should interpret his poem through his point of view and the traditions of the romantic poets who talked about the Grecian urn or the solitary reaper or the daffodils or the nightingale and termed nature to be a mother, a guide, and having a healing effect to our de energized and parched souls. Now let's come to the textual information about the poet. John Keats, who was born in 1795 and lived up to 1821, was a British romantic poet. Although trained to be a surgeon, Keats decided to devote himself wholly to poetry. Keats' secret, his power to sway and delight the readers, lies primarily in his gift for perceiving the world and living his moods and aspirations in terms of language. The following is an excerpt from his poem Endymion, a poetic romance. The poem is based on a Greek legend in which Endymion, a beautiful young shepherd and a poet who lived on Mount Latmus, had a vision of Cynthia, the moon goddess. The enchanted youth resolved to seek her out and so wandered away through the forest and down under the sea. Now, coming to the text, Keats writes, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but will keep a bower quiet for us and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing." The first line itself says that a thing of beauty is not only a thing of beauty that we see in nature, a thing of beauty can be anything. It can be the flowers that bloom in nature, the green forests, or the sun setting in the horizon, or the sun rising from the mountains, or a beautiful night with a full moon shining brightly in the sky, or this clear sky filled with twinkling beautiful stars, or it can be a friend with whom we share our thoughts and we remain in eloquent silence for a long time. These many things can be thing of beauty. And he says that a thing of beauty is a joy forever, means the beautiful things that we see and experience in our life, it remains forever. It gives us joy when we recollect and relive these moments or these things of beauty. We get energized in this gloomy and exhausted world. Its loveliness increases. He says that the beauty of a thing that we have seen or experienced or lived, it increases, its loveliness increases, and it will never pass into nothingness. That means it will never cease to be. It will always remain in our heart forever, but will keep a bower. A bower is a cool and shady place like an oasis in the desert that gives relief to the tired traveler who has journeyed under the heat of the scorching sun. So he says that, but will keep a bower quiet for us. That means the things of beauty that we have seen in this world, in this gloomy world where we find our life unworthy of living, these things of beauty will act like a bower, like a cool shade, like an energy and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. In today's world, when we find everywhere there is a gloomy atmosphere, the world is so unworthy of living, and we even cannot get sound sleep. Instead of getting sweet dreams, we have nightmares, and the health of us being a far cry for us, and the breathing, which we can term as a regular panting in today's world, all these things will become beautiful when a thing of beauty we see in this nature, we see in this world, and it's a joy forever for us. Therefore, on every morrow, are we wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, spite of despondence, of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and over-darkened ways made for our searching. So here Keats, in the lines of this stanza, he says that we are wreathing. What is a wreath? A wreath is a circular flower band which we can see mostly in televisions when ministers go for paying Shraddhanjalis or tributes to the martyrs or to the great men who have sacrificed their life. So we are making a wreath of beautiful flowers. And what are these beautiful flowers? These are the things of beauty which we see, which we enjoy, and which we experience. So every day, whatever beautiful things we enjoy or we see, we are making a wreath, a flowery band for us that will energize us to live in this earth, a flowery band to bind us to the earth, to trap us to this earth, because we find that life is so gloomy, the life is so exhausted and tired, it is so hopeless that we find it very difficult to live in this world, and that is why we wreath a flowery band and trap ourselves to this earth. Spite of despondence, spite of the hopelessness of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, we find a number of inhuman acts of killing every day. We find people exploiting others. We find people become calculative and manipulative. We find people trying to take something out of us, becoming selflessness. And in this kind of world where dearth of noble natures, where we find that noble things are lacking, of the gloomy days of all the unhealthy and over darkened ways, all the unhealthy and over darkened ways that we see in this world made for our searching. So these darkened ways and unhealthy days that we live in this world, and to make it happy, we are making a wreath every day, a wreath of beautiful things, a wreath of pretty things, so that we can trap ourselves to this earth and live. Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits, such as the sun, the moon, trees old and young, sprouting a shady moon for simple sheep, and such are daffodils. With a green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make against the hot season. So here Keats says that in spite of all these dirt and inhuman acts that we see every day, some shape of beauty moves away the pall. Some shape of beauty, some beautiful thing, something of beauty that we experience and see, it moves away the cover that has made our heart gloomy and exhausted, that has made our heart hopeless and desperate from our dark spirits, such the sun, the moon. These beautiful things can be the sun, which is present in the nature. It can be the moon, the setting and rising of the beautiful sun, the scenery of the horizon, the beautiful moon shining in the sky, trees old and young. It is in this world that we find that human beings, when they get older, they are not having a place in this world. But here, what Keats says that trees old and young, even the small trees that are sprouting, and the big and old trees like the peepal or the banyan tree, both have a place in this world, sprouting a shady boon, because nature does not discriminate between anything. It is the human tendency that we discriminate among old and new. For simple sheep, and such are daffodils. Here, simple sheep, here it refers to the human beings who live in this world, and such as daffodils, the flowers, the daffodil flowers. Here, when we read Wordsworth's poem, we read the lines when he says that when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. And then he concludes the poem saying that for oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart fills with pleasure and dances with the daffodils. Here, the beautiful nature, the beauty of the nature that lies latent in the heart of Wordsworth. And he says that it was so engrossed in his heart, the beautiful scene of the dancing and fluttering daffodils, that whenever Wordsworth was alone, when he was in solitude and in a vacant mood, when he lay in his couch, and the recollection of these daffodils came into his heart and mind, he forgot everything and danced with these daffodils. So such is the strength of nature and natural beauties that make our lives rejoice and relive again. For simple sheep and such are daffodils, with the green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make against the hot season. So these are some of the beautiful things that we see in the world or we experience in the world. Maybe a beautiful carpet, maybe a beautiful monument, maybe a beautiful scene, or maybe a beautiful smile we have seen, or maybe we have seen some children, despite of their poverty and their hopelessness, we find them playing and smiling. So such sights of beauty that make a image in our heart, and that removes the cover of gloominess from our heart and rejoices us, and again energizes us to live in this world. It gives a hope against the hot season, against the gloominess, against the sadness, against every exploitation, every pain and sorrow that we realize in this world. These things of beauty are good for us, and it rejoices our parched and gloomy heart. The mid-forest brake, rich with a sprinkling of fair musk rose blooms, and such too is the grandeur of the dooms we have imagined for the mighty dead, all lovely tales that we have heard or read, an endless fountain of immortal drink, pouring unto us from the heavens spring. Then he says that even we can see a beautiful sight in the mid-forest brake. That means the blooming flowers, the greenery of the forest, the birds flying and chirping among the trees, all these beautiful things which we can see in nature, rich with a sprinkling of fair musk rose blooms, the musk rose blooming in nature, the beauty of the scene that engrosses our heart and makes us forget our gloom and hopelessness. And such too is the grandeur of the dooms. Here in this line, Keats wants to say that even things of beauty in the nature or anywhere that makes us energized, it makes us enlivened, and such is the grandeur of doom. Even death is a thing that gives us energy to live and to fight and to struggle in this world, and death of whom not we, because we all the time are afraid of our life and afraid of the death that can come to us. It is the death of those great men who have sacrificed their life for some noble cause, who have lived in this world for an ideals, who lived for their principles, and at last they had become a martyr. They have sacrificed their life for the noble cause of human beings, and the death of such people, the stories of such people where we have read or heard by someone, or these lovely tales make even death beautiful as it makes life beautiful. An endless fountain of immortal drink. So, this kind of fountain, this kind of nectar, this kind of elixir that nature gives to our heart, which attracts us and which gives us a strength to live in this manipulative and calculative world. So, this kind of immortal drink is poured from the heaven by the Lord who has created this world, and this immortal drink energizes us, gives us a new life, gives us a strength to live in this world and even let others live. In his poem Ode to Nightingale, John Keats says, "Darkling, I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many amused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath." These lines show that how Keats was desperate and disappointed with this world wherein he lived. In the same way, we will be seeing some lines written by Ben Jonson in his poem Song to Celia. He writes, "I sent thee late a rosy wreath, not so much honouring thee, as giving it a hope that there it could not withered be, but thou thereon didst only breathe, and sentest it back to me, since when it grows and smells, I swear, not of itself, but thee." These lines show how eternal love played a role in human life, how it nourished human life, and how it acted like a divine nectar in the life of human beings. So, "A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever" is a philosophical poem wherein Keats tells us that this world of today is in fact unworthy of living, where people are critics, where people do not love nature, where people do not bother to gaze at the beauties and bounties of nature. They have become extremely inhuman and machine-like, where love and compassion can be seldom seen. Despite all the hopelessness, despite all these awkwardness, despite all the nastiness, there is some place in nature and this world that has beauty and that holds us to move on in our life. I would like to say that all the poetries have a number of different interpretations by different people, but keeping in mind the romantic traditions, I have tried my best to interpret this poem with the poet's point of view in relation to the romantic poets and their traditions. Hope you understand the theme. Thank you for listening to me.